people are up in arms about that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. The fact is that people are up in arms about black lung, that they're up in arms about black lung back in Pennsylvania and down in South Carolina, down in the places where they mine that. The fact of the matter is that these nuclear facilities are being brought out here. I'm not a doomcough. I don't come to Iowa and start talking about, black lung disease. People don't have black lung disease that much around here. What they've got is leukemia and lymphoma, etc., from the nuclear reactors. So what we try to do is the obvious source of political power is ourselves and our people. And so the fact is that people deal with things that are of a direct interest to them. And so therefore, people have to mobilize. It's an old Alinsky concept in organizing people to empower themselves. They will empower themselves to deal with things that they think are relevant to their own lives. So that's not to deminimize the importance of black lung or anything else. But the fact of the matter is that those things have to be dealt with by the people who are at best at interest in those things. So therefore we mobilize and we organize in Pennsylvania and other places relating to black lung. There's a follow-up on that. Sure. They're all having no money, is what they're having, because all the money's going to the nuclear power industry, is what's happening. I don't mean to be flip about that. There's nothing hard about that analysis. If you take the hundreds of billions and billions of dollars that have been invested in the nuclear power industry over the last 35 years and have put them into geothermal, into solar, into other areas, we would be ages ahead of where we are now. That would be producing a lot more than 3% of the electricity in the United States right now. You can be guaranteed that that's true. So that's the problem. It's a question of the allocation of our resources. That's what we have to do. Yes, there was another one right here.
What, in fact, is the incidence rate of cancer, say, among co-workers parents who have been 9 years now?
Yeah. It's interesting. One of the things that we tried to get the court to do was to include an order compelling Kerr-McGee to do follow-up on these people. They haven't done any follow-up on the people. They don't even know where the people are. They had a turnover rate of people coming in and out of there, 18, 19 years old, coming in, getting maxed out, and then leaving and going away. They never followed them up. They never gave them any notice of what the stuff could do to them or anything. So we've been talking with the Environmental Policy Center back in Washington, D.C., trying to facilitate their getting a grant to go and try to find these people. Kerr-McGee will not give over to them the names of the people because they're afraid that we're going to be trying to interview them to find out about all the incidents that occurred at the plant. So we've been trying to get a grant together to try to find these people to do some kind of tests. Kerr-McGee will not do it. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission will not do it. That's the situation that we unfortunately are faced with right now. Yes?
They had at one point a 30% turnover among 18, 19-year-olds coming into work, and they were given such poor training that the kids would even go into contests saying who could burn out the fastest or get hot the fastest.
Well, taking it one part at a time, the latter part is definitely true. They would try to see who could get the hottest the fastest. They also had a game where they would use slingshots and shoot these things out across the rooms at each other. And they also had people taking them home and giving them to their children to take to show and tell. So the people didn't have any idea what this stuff really was. Now, the actual percentages of the turnover rates, we've made different computations at different levels to try to put in. They told us we weren't going to be allowed to put that into evidence. So we never did finalize all those statistical studies. The fact is, though, that they had an extraordinary rate of turnover of these people coming in and getting maxed out. You can imagine why they're getting maxed out if they're having slingshot fights, with this stuff. So the fact is there was an awful lot of that stuff going on. We put on a number of instances of that stuff happening, and the court and the jury both were absolutely convinced that these people didn't know anything about what they were dealing with at that place. And as I said, that I described for you what we found out about with Richard Valentine, editing out. Well, I guess I didn't tell you about that. Yes? Okay, that was this afternoon. I'm getting a little messed up. Anyway, there's an interesting thing. Richard Valentine, who was the head of health and safety for Kerr-McGee, comes on to testify saying, it isn't true that these people didn't know about this stuff. We prepared a health manual for these people. We said, oh, good, we'd like to subpoena that and get it. Oh, well, that's national security. I'm sorry, can't have that. So, we happened to rummage around at something, and we had 2 of them anyhow. So we end up getting a copy of this thing. So we end up blowing it up in big pictures for the jury. And Richard Valentine was on the stand, and we said, Mr. Valentine, can you tell us where you got the source for a lot of this information? Oh, various places. I can't remember exactly where I got it. Didn't you, in fact, plagiarize this entire pamphlet from a 1958 Science magazine article, Mr. Valentine? I may have referred to that in the past. So we said, oh, really? Well, let's take a look at this. And we blew up for the jury great big huge pages of the health manual and full pages of the Science magazine article, and it was verbatim, paragraph after paragraph after paragraph after paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, except for the references to cancer, which they had edited out. Every single one of them. And the jury sat there going, So it wasn't something that was a mistake. It wasn't something that they just didn't have enough money to have a program to adequately educate these people. They set people on to editing out of public literature information about the cancer that they would get for using or messing with this stuff. That's what helped generate the $10 million judgment against them. How do I explain it in mixed company, or how do I explain it, in public, or what? How do I explain it? Actually, not to be facetious, the actual fact of the matter is that Kerr-McGee was an oil company, a bunch of oil roughnecks, from the oil fields and tough slugging it out days. They were big union busters, real tough operation. What happened is that Senator Robert S. Kerr, the Kerr of Kerr-McGee, who was also the governor of Oklahoma for 2 terms, and then became the United States Senator, was a crook, an absolute criminal that should have been put in federal prison. Did you all get that? Should have been put in federal prison, years ago. And, the fact of the matter is he was into taking bribes and doing everything. It's all been fairly well established. There's a book about him out now saying that he bought organs for churches and pianos for whorehouses. That's the name of the book. And, showing all the stuff that he did, big wheeler dealer. He had a canal dug all the way up into Oklahoma. They have a submarine testing base in Oklahoma that Senator Robert S. Kerr had built, and ran out and bought up the land all along where the canal was going to be dug in, and sold it to the United States government for millions of dollars of profit. When he died, they went and found his safety deposit boxes, and they opened them up, and $100 bills fell out all over everybody. The guy was a gangster and a crook. So what he did, when he heard that there was going to be this big push for the plutonium breeder reactor, he ran in and got a corner on the market to produce the plutonium fuel rods for the reactor, and also to develop the expertise to reprocess the spent fuel from the nuclear reactor to take the plutonium out of it, because the breeder reactor, just as its name indicates, breeds and produces more plutonium than it actually uses up in the production of electricity. That's what the whole theory of that thing was. And so he ran out and got a corner on the market and got the contracts and pushed them into this big oil company with all these oil roughnecks in there. When I did the deposition of Dean McGee, and I asked him, I said, Mr. McGee, when you got ready to move into this whole area of plutonium production, can you tell me what kind of discussions you had on your board of directors about what your major concerns were? Well, he said, we knew that it was going to be, cost an awful lot of money for our initial startup. We knew it was going to take us an awful long time to turn it around to get making a profit. We knew there was an awful lot of high technology in it. And he went on and on and on and on, and never once mentioned the fact that it was carcinogenic. Never once mentioned the fact that it had this terrible rate of contaminating and killing all the people that it worked with it. Never even talked about it. And so I sat and waited for him to finish, and he got all done. I asked him, I said, look, did you ever think about the problem of how cancer-causing it was and what it would do to your workers? There was this big, long pause. And he went, did we ever think about it, or did we ever discuss it? And I said, Either one. Pick either one. And he went, no. So the fact of the matter is, and Dean McGee is not a really mean, malevolent guy like Kerr is. That what it is what we call, in a lot of the social justice circles now in the church work, is what we call structural sin. People are of the opinion that you sit across the table from somebody, and unless they look like Al Capone, that they're not evil people. And that when someone lies to you, you can tell. Well, that's not true. People get into the structures and they do the things that are necessary to maintain their career and to maintain their income and to maintain their family and their kids and all this other kind of stuff. They're not mean people. There's something wrong with the structures. There's something wrong with the structures of a federal program that'll give a contract down to a company that has no expertise whatsoever in dealing with nuclear matters and assign to them the contract to build these nuclear fuel rods when they're an oil company. There's something wrong with that kind of structure. There's something wrong with a structure that'll hire people for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission who just got through working for Kerr McGee and send them out there to inspect their place. There's something wrong with that structure. It doesn't mean that people are evil. It's a very important thing, I think, for us to understand. And I came to have some of the insight in working in the Jesuit National Headquarters, is they have a whole concept of social sin. And there's a big debate raging now in the Christian church about, where to put the emphasis. Do you put the emphasis on sort of individuated sin of, people who are worried about their sex life or whether they eat too much or whether they swear, that kind of stuff? Well, they go out and, they produce plutonium and give hundreds of people cancer all around the facility. They don't worry about that because it's not my fault. You see? And the fact of the matter is, all of us sit here, just stop and think. We think about the people in Germany and we say, boy, if I was in Germany in the 1920s, I would have stopped those people. If I'd lived back in, in the South in the 1850s and stuff, I never would have owned any of those slaves. If I lived back in the days of Rome, I never would have owned any of those slaves or let those Christians be fed to the lions or anything like that. Fortunately, I live at a time when there aren't any problems. So I don't really have to do anything, And they say to you, just stop and think, we establish contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, right? And they come down and they interview you on the street and they say, is it true what they say about this country building this humongous thermonuclear weapons facilities and threatening at least 12 separate times in the last 25 years to unilaterally use thermonuclear weapons against countries all around the world to enforce your opinion upon them? And you say, hey, that's not my fault. And you say, well, who'd you elect for president? You say, I voted for Ronald Reagan. You voted for who, they say? Don't you know about Ronald Reagan? Don't you know what Ronald Reagan is? And you do. But the fact is, you think you don't have very many other choices. So the question is, are you going to vote for Ronald Reagan, who goes and invades Grenada and, is sending a totally illegal expeditionary force to go in and invade Nicaragua? Or do you vote for Mondale, who was vice president while we were invading Vietnam and paid, millions and billions of dollars to send 500,000 troops over there and kill all those people? You say, well, I've only got limited choices. I got to pick one of these guys. That's not true. That's not true. The truth of the matter is that you don't want to do the work that's necessary to go out and elect somebody else. And you don't want to do the work to go out and it's not just you, it's me, it's all of us. We're taken up with other things. We've got our jobs, we've got our children, we've got everything. But what we have to do is we have to try to ask ourselves questions that have to do with whether we really believe in sort of basic Judeo-Christian social ethical values. Doesn't mean you have to go to church every Sunday or, give 10% of your salary to the churches or anything like that. What it means is, do you really believe any of these things? How can you vote for a person who sits right there and lies right at you when you know perfectly well they're lying? And one of the basic tenets of Judeo-Christian values is to tell the truth. You can't do that stuff. So it's a lot harder to do some of these things, to eradicate the social, structural causes of injustice. But these are the things that the churches are now turning our attention to. How can we, in fact, work together out of a Judeo-Christian heritage to bring these values into reality? to give our people a choice so that when they turn 21 years old, they don't have to face that old thing of saying, well, now you're grown up. Now you deal with the world the way it really is. I know we told you not to lie. I know we told you not to hurt your friend Tommy. I know we told you this, but it is now time for number one. It is now time for you to get a job. It's time for you to make a living. You know, and your choices are you have to go work for the nuclear facility. You have to go work for this. You have to go join the Army. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You don't have to do any of that stuff. And it's only by withdrawing our affirmative endorsement of those types of structures that they will collapse. That is what will happen. And that is the campaign, for example, that we're involved in at the Christic Institute. How do you withdraw your support, your affirmative support for the nuclear industry? You do it by trying to formulate other programs for other energy. It's not that one is opposed to having electric power. That what you're interested in is shifting the investments over into another kind of power that doesn't have cancer on the other end of it and doesn't have death on the other end of it. That's all. So those are the things that we have to do. That's how I explain what happened at Kerr-McGee. There were some bad apples like Kerr and those other people in the place that are evil people. You know, Richard Valentine got on the stand, and when that stuff was happening, he was dying. He was being crushed, revealing what he did about editing out that stuff. He's just a poor little guy. He's trying to make a living. He's trying to placate his bosses. He's trying to do that stuff. But it all adds up. It all adds up to evil. You know, people all around the world consider the American people to be kind of malevolent. Because we sit down and watch them invade Grenada. We watch them invade Vietnam. You know, we watch them build the biggest nuclear arsenal in the entire history of the world. We all sit there and say, hey, what am I going to do? I got to pay my taxes. You know, now this is not to condemn anybody. I have the same kind of weaknesses as everybody else. What we have to do is work together to discuss these things, to figure out how to articulate affirmative alternatives to these policies, so that we can, in fact, make a choice, where we're not confined to making a choice between, you know, Ronald Reagan and Walter Mondale. You know, that we have some people around like Tom Harkin and some of these people. These are new people. These are people who do fairly courageous things. These are people who know enough to do the right thing. You know, I don't even know Tom Harkin very well. You know, he's out here, but I know he's here because I work back in Washington, D.C., and everybody back in Washington, D.C. knows Tom Harkin. And Tom Harkin's a good man, you see. So there are some fundamental differences that you can see here. You know, people who vote to expend money for military hardware as opposed to spending money for feeding people are messing in the area of basic human values, and that you're able to make a choice between people like that. So these are the things, that's how I would explain what happened at Kerr-McGee. It's the simple mistakes that we all make out of weakness, a little blend of some evil people, you know, like Kerr. But basically, it's our failure to do our work, you know. And just stop and think, you know, how many of you, just as we're sitting here now, are actually planning to go out and try to find your congressperson and contact them about either one of these two things? Very few of you yet. See, very few of you yet. You want to sit, you want to listen to a talk like this and be entertained, and then go home, and in a couple of days you'll say, I remember that. I'll go see the Silkwood movie, or I'll go read a book about this or something. But the bottom line is whether or not you're willing to dislocate yourself from your schedule enough to sit down and write a letter to your congressperson. You know, this isn't asking you to climb Mount Everest, you know? And so that's how I explain how Kerr-McGee gets away with the things they get away with. How the Nuclear Regulatory Commission stays like it is. Because they're not afraid of us. They don't think we're going to do anything. 72% of the American people don't even know who their congressperson is. Say nothing about what committees they sit on. To say absolutely nothing about how they vote on any particular bill. You know, that's work we've got to do. And I think the people in the religious community have to mobilize to talk all of ourselves into doing our work as members of a democracy, as members of one of the few governments in the world where we can do anything about this yet. because the times are serious times. The threat of thermonuclear annihilation is not something that isn't addressed in the book of Revelations. It's not as though we haven't been warned about this stuff. And we are the generation that sits and watches it draw nearer and nearer every day. And we are the ones who will stop it, if indeed it's ever going to be stopped. Now, that's how I would explain how Kerr-McGee gets away with what they get away with. It's us. It's us who don't do the things that we know enough can be done. One final one, and I'll let everybody go here.
It's not only letters. The problem is that in 1984 we can expect $100 billion of contributions to come from political action committees, most of which have special interests, most of the special interests running absolutely counter to the well-being of the American public.
Mm-hmm.
And letters aren't going to ignore the fate of dollars unless we can do something about the tax situation in our political structure.
Well, the point is that these PACs, these political action committees, are mustering up millions of dollars and giving them to these candidates, et cetera, and they're primarily devoted to things that are contrary to the public interest. The fact of the matter is that if you wanted to have a statute outlawing the payment of money by these PACs, you could do it. All you got to do is go home and draft up a piece of legislation, just like that. Send it to your congressman. Say, I want you to pass that, or I'm going to vote against you.
Common cause
Yeah.
is exactly that force.
I know. That's right. That's right. So that's one of the places you can do it on. But see, these are things that, it's a little hard for me to point this stuff out because, I've spent my whole last, 25 years or something like that working on these things, And it seems pretty easy to me because I know enough. You write to a congressman, you go to a congressman, holler at him, tell him you're going to throw him out, etc. And these are not things that most of us do. But, it's a little like, going to high school and being one of those kids who never does anything. Doesn't go out for any of the sports, doesn't go to any of the clubs, just gets a C plus, in school and stuff like that. Most of us have known enough to transcend that so that we participated and we were active in doing things and we've decided to go on to college, etc., like that, What you have to do is try to translate that same kind of discomfort at non-participation into the political and social realm. That most of us sit around and watch all that stuff go on as though we're spectators. We didn't do that in high school. Most of us don't do that in college. There's no reason why we should do that in the political realm. The issues are too serious. The people right here in this room could make extraordinary differences if you all decided you really wanted to. Those of us who worked on the Karen Silkwood case, there were about maybe 10 or 12 of us that did all this stuff. 10 or 12 people. We could take the front row here and go do it. You can pick something just like that and go do it. These people, Kerr-McGee, make $3 billion a year. We earn $600 a month, each one of us. So you put the ratio there and see that it's not just all money. It's people power. It's personal commitment and dedication to getting something done. And all the people here have those assets, have that kind of personal commitment. We don't have the money, but you don't absolutely need the money. So that it's the time and the energy and the devotion and the dedication that can make the difference in these things. Okay, now one final one, and I'll let you go at 10.
Some of us haven't much money. We have even less time, and I'd just like to comment that if we don't have the time, one fairly efficient and lazy thing we can do is to give some money for common cause, friends of the earth, community concerns I have, and pay people like you to do that for us. It's a lot more efficient, than running around to ourselves. And that's true.
No, it's true, but I can tell you this, if I ever did have the opportunity to have someone contribute, a month of their salary to us, or a month of their time, I'd take their time. I can tell you that, because then they get to learn things. They come to Washington, and they see that people back there put their pants on one leg at a time, just like they do out here. And that you don't have to be any Einstein to figure out how to handle these people. It just takes a decision to put one foot in front of the other and go and do this stuff. And it's back here that the differences are made. back here and out in the other states around the country, you know. That's where the differences are made. So that, you know, you do have those kind of choices, but you can try to figure out how to restructure your life a little bit to get more of that kind of time to do these things. You know, so there is some time involved, and some letters to be written, and some contacts to be made. And that's what we'd ask you to do, to dedicate yourself to do some of those kind of things. You know, just try to figure out one thing that you can do just because you came to this meeting tonight, that you can do that you wouldn't have done before, to get a hold of one of those congressmen or senators or something to make the difference in this area of the Atomic Energy Commission and the Atomic Energy Act, in this area of federal civil rights. Okay? Thank you very much. It's 10 o'clock.